If you have ever felt emotionally drained, burned out, and tired of just being at times because you're always everywhere and you're always giving and giving, that is the cost of the emotional labor. Let's chat. Check it out. Hey, everybody, and welcome back to the Positivity Experience. It is your girl, Lori, and I am so excited that you are here. And as we're coming upon Love Day, the whole Valentine's Day time, I thought this would be a really good opportunity to introduce this right after Trauma Bonds last weekend. So I really want you to sit with that. And, I've had some great feedback on that and, them going, wow, I didn't realize in a trauma bond, or maybe I was creating a trauma bond. Remember, awareness is always the first step. And if you didn't listen to it, I would encourage you to go back. If you have the worksheet, bring this worksheet over on Patreon as well. These two will go hand in hand. If that's your jam and you are interested in the worksheet, you're welcome to have it at the Patreon, and that's patreon.com/the positivity experience, or you can click that link that will have also my website link and any other resources that you may need right in the description of this show. But the emotional labor piece of this, I was thinking about it, and I was thinking about the emotional labor that I give things. Now, I've obviously done it with my daughter, with her mental health, but I've definitely pulled back. We'll talk about that. I do it with things, and I end up even doing it with the work I do. Not so much the podcast, not so much here. I really feel not as emotionally labored, but it's not negative, right? What I'm going to talk to you about is going to be more negative on here, but it's not negative. And I wouldn't even call it an emotional drain or labor. It's more like I too have to calm down. Like, okay, calm down. You're helping people as best that you can, but why did you get into doing this? See, because sometimes we have to reevaluate our why in order to know where we're putting emotional labor. And literally, I literally had this oh my God, okay, I want to be able to provide more value. I have that free workbook on letting go. Well, I want to transition some into giving you things that you don't have to just watch on social media, or that's why the worksheet in the Patreon, that's why I invented that. And created it in an event Patreon. I created the worksheet, but I want to have workshops. I want to have different things that can give you this. And I realized that my emotional labor was wanting to do those things, but not feeling like it, oh God, I don't feel like it, or not knowing how to start, right? And the emotional labor that I put behind that, because I'm trying to do all of these things, that creates burnout. That really does. So I have a little plan, different things I want to do on YouTube, different things I want to do. And I have to really focus on that, because I will have emotional labor on every other area of my life. Now that's more of the positive one, because I was able to pull something and go, hey girl, hey, you need to simmer down. You're feeling a little stuck. You're feeling a little redundant. You're feeling a little boring for yourself and probably others. Don't worry about others though. You're doing it for you. What can you do to continue this path that you want to do, to be able to give people a harsh approach, but give them actionable steps? Had to have a come to Jesus meeting with myself. And that's what you're going to have to do here. Now, I gave you the side that I saw it, I feel it, and now I'm going to take action behind it. Because remember, that's the thing. You can see it, you can know it, but are you going to take action? Because if you don't, then you're creating that own suffering on your own self. So I want to talk to you about emotional labor and the invisibility of why it is taking such a toll on you. And you cannot take on everybody else's burdens. Now, this is where I have been good. And I have clients who go through, oh my God, such intense things. Such intense things. But I can't take on that emotional burden. I provide resources. I will be here. I will be a safe space. But when we are done, I have to be able to go and get a piece of pizza and sit down and crochet and not carry it with me. Now, that is a learned skill. I do not expect you to take this here and be like, I can do that. It's going to take a minute, but awareness is going to be your key here. And we're going to go into it. And some of this has been inflicted upon you. Some of this has been given to you. Hello, trauma bond and expectations. All of these things come in. And if you feel drained after handling somebody else's problems, you know that you're given this emotional labor. And it's, you know why it's tricky? I think it's tricky too, because You love someone. This is a very normal human response, by the way, whatever the hell normal is. But you want someone to not feel pain, especially if you are projecting what you went through onto another person. And I don't mean helping them like, hey, I've been there, let me give you tools, but projecting how you would feel in that situation. So let's give you an example. Someone is in a bad relationship. Doesn't have to be marriage. You're in a bad relationship and you can see them staying a little bit longer. But remember, they did not ask for your opinion or help, but you kind of see it and you realize that they are really struggling and they just don't know what to do. And you have decided, well, I was in that place. I don't want them to go through that. Good in theory, bad in execution. So now you come in and you are projecting how you felt and how you feel onto them. So now you take on their emotional stuff. Now this is not to be confused with not having empathy. You can have empathy. You're just not carrying it with you. This is where the emotional labor comes into play, because that piece of it is hella important. It really is. So if you check yourself and go projection, there's a podcast on that too, by the way, on projection. It's back, like I said, in the hundreds somewhere. But if you are focusing on how somebody feels or what you don't want them to experience or the value that you want to show them that you have, that's emotional labor. And you just feel drained as hell. You're like, oh my God. Every time they go through this is how I feel. This is always an issue, blah, 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 blah. So this is what you're telling yourself, but then you're doing the emotional labor, right? It's not about blaming, but it's about awareness. You got to know where it is. And if you're doing it, you can prevent it. But again, that's like working on your attachments, working on your trauma bonds, working on your anxieties. And it's the unpaid, invisible effort, right? Because that's what you're doing. You're like, I'm doing this, but then it feels very unpaid, involving managing and regulating emotions, even in yourself, by the way. So now, since you've taken it on, now you have to regulate your emotions on what you think that they should do. And you're the one who's been putting all this time and effort into it. And they're not making the change, but they keep telling you that they want to change and you keep projecting. And now you're irritated and now they're irritated. And now you're trying to regulate your emotions and you're trying to manage their emotions. Again, good in theory, horrible in execution, because this will put so many strains upon relationships. It also creates expectations. And, you have to understand, you absolutely listen. You absolutely, support. Love that for you. But you cannot keep doing it if you are taking it on as your responsibility. Because then you're managing their conflicts or trying to prevent those conflicts. Because you will do that. I know you've seen people who will step in. Okay, you see something happening. Okay, fairness and justice, different. If you can do something, absolutely do something. But you see somebody else, when I say fairness and justice, I don't just mean the legal system. If you see somebody else and you can see that there's a conflict, now you're going to swoop in with your sword drawn and take over that conflict. Stop doing that, especially when you have a kid. And I know it's hard. Oh my God, I know it's hard. Ooh-wee. It is so difficult to stay in your lane. But if not, it causes emotional labor. And then everybody involved gets stressed out at some point. And there is this guy, Arlie, I believe I wrote his name down, Arlie Hochschild. He's a sociologist. And yeah, believe me, sociology is a thing. And he did this based in workplace, but now it's expanded into interpersonal relationships. In general, that's where the emotional labor came into play. Labor meaning work, but it is a lot of work. And think about right now. Okay, let's play this game together. Whose emotions are you trying to handle and regulate at this moment in time? Whose relationships? Are you trying to regulate them from feeling the pain? Are you trying to take on them by even looking at resources over and over again? That goes past helping, that goes into fixing. Helping, fixing, two different things. To fix means that you are in control of that and you're not. I know it's hard to watch somebody go through pain. I know it's hard to watch the train that you can see this brick wall. You see the brick wall. You've ran into the brick wall. You've run the train into the brick wall. And you see the brick wall. And you see this train coming. And that's this person's situation. What they're experiencing, what they're going through. And if they don't make said change, they're going to hit this brick wall. Now you see this. And you're watching it and you're thinking, oh God, oh my God, you just hit the brick wall. And then you now feel some feeling about how you should have come in and stopped it. Well, then you're just enabling this dependency. You're enabling codependency by stopping everybody's pain. Good in theory, bad in execution. Because that will breed a lot of things. And remember, you're doing so from your perspective only. And how you felt. But remember, we all process things differently. And if you're enabling someone by running in to save the day at every 5 minutes and you don't want them to have conflict, that is emotional labor. And yes, it's attachment. Yes, it's control. Yes, it's ego. But all of that creates emotional burnout and emotional labor. And the issue with that too is I think we also do that not just out of empathy, but to seem valuable, right? To prove purpose, to prove worth, to prove validity of self. And so there's an underlier that we benefit from it, even if you don't want to acknowledge it. It's a fact. I feel important and I feel valid when I can help somebody else. Again, different to say, oh, I'm providing empowerment. I'm doing this. I'm not going to fix it. I'm going to give you tools. Same thing with watching this person or people take the train and run into the brick wall. All you can do is provide resources as needed, not because you think they need them, because that will create such emotional burnout and it just becomes a problem. You're not going to be able to think right. You're going to be entirely consumed with these people. And it's just awful. It's just awful because you have this feeling of helplessness. You have this feeling of anger because you're like, what the hell? Can't they see this? And you're trying to manage it. And that's just not going to be good for you at all. And, it's that unpaid invisibility of effort. Going back to that. Here's some examples of that because I feel like that's important. Always mediating family arguments. Okay. Is this you? Are you always like, well, because now that goes into triangulation at times. But let's say, your sister wants you to talk to your mom, triangulation too, but your sister is telling you about all the conflict with the uncle. Your mom is also telling you the issue that she has with your sister because your sister didn't stand up for her because of the issue that the mom has with the uncle. And now this is being put on you. Now, as an adult, you are allowing this, but we know why it happens. It happens because you were assigned this role early as a child. You are the family fixer. You are the caregiver. You are the family fixer. You are the one that you're always hosting the dinners. You're always putting everybody together. You're swirling everybody together. And now you're trying to prevent arguments. You're trying to mediate it. And you have been assigned this role either by somebody else or you've given yourself that role because you felt so afraid that you never wanted anybody to have feelings or to put you in some kind of a jeopardized situation. And that's where the emotional labor comes in. Because now you're mediating everything. But the same way you're mediating, the same way you can unmediate. See, you have got to be willing to be disliked, called selfish, called anything else, and be okay with people distancing. Because if people distance because you are setting boundaries and they are not liking those boundaries, if they truly care, they might be like, well, that sucks. Oh, I don't like that. That's prickly. It's prickly. But hey, if this works for them, people will get used to it. We adapt. We adapt. There are people who said, I will never use the internet. The internet's the devil. I will never use this internet. Never going to happen. Well, they adapted and here we're all on the internet. Okay. So my point to that is people will adapt based on the changes or they won't. They'll either get on board or they won't. But your emotional labor also goes into, let me run this mediation so nobody gets mad at me. So now we go back to you managing their emotions, but managing your own at the same time. Now your insecurity is everywhere and you're trying to make it make sense and you don't want people to be mad. And now you're going through that and you're trying to manage theirs. Emotional labor, that's burnout. You're going to burn the hell right on out. And now, and I didn't put this on my notes for the, maybe I'll bring it up in Patreon, but you have to ask yourself, is it worth that emotional labor, and why? Why? Because if you say it is, what are you getting out of it? Well, mom needs me. Oh, that's what it is. So when you're aware of the why you're giving all of this labor is where you'll be able to say, do I want to prevent this? And then you're constantly checking on people. You are totally like suppressing your own feelings, your own direction, and you're checking in all the time because you don't want to upset somebody. Living a life of worrying about upsetting somebody, worrying if they're valid to you, you will totally live in emotional labor. And I mean, listen, that's life, right? There's going to be life things that happen, and we're going to be labored at things. But to what level? Most things are out of your control, but there are things you can be to a point to where you are okay with being disliked. You're okay with quote unquote being disowned because you're not taking on the labor of somebody else. And sometimes we create that monster, right? Because as human beings, how the human brain works, we work on immediate rewards. This is why we need those immediate rewards where we screw ourselves. So if let's say if they know that they can call you, boom, you're going to do it. Boom, you're going to do it. Boom, you're going to do it. Now, remember, you're over here emotionally laboring. They don't give a shit. They're like, all right. And then the moment that changes, there's a ripple in their world. And kind of yours too, especially if you're in a trauma bond. But you have to ask yourself right now, what are you doing for free within yourself and not getting paid for? And I don't mean work. And listen, it's not all going to be about you getting paid every 5 minutes emotionally. That's not a thing. But are you giving all of this emotional stuff for free? Meaning, do you feel as though you are respected? Do you feel as though there's some level of reciprocation based on respective boundaries? What's the fair exchange here? So you have to ask yourself, how much is this costing me? Not what you want, not falling in love with hope, not worrying about being abandoned. What is this worth to you? What is this worth? And when you look at it on paper without attaching a lot of emotion to it, which I understand is a lot easier for some people than it is others, but we'll get you there. But if you just look at the facts, take emotion out for a minute. I don't care if it's mom, I don't care if it's the spouse, just take that out for a minute and just look at it as you're looking at it. You are an accountant and you're looking at it on paper. And you go, hey, what are the facts? The facts is this person is this person and this person is this person. What actions are happening here? Well, this is happening. Okay, this person's giving a hell of a lot more. Some of that's on them. But then where is the fair exchange of energy? Is this beneficial? If it isn't, then let's make some changes. Nothing changes unless it changes. The issue is you're operating out of emotion. There's an emotional element there. I mean, you're not a Roomba. Of course, you're going to have emotions. But when you're looking at it that way, that's where the emotional labor comes in at. And again, the big part of that is projection. I know what I would want. I would want someone to fix this. I would want somebody to save me. I would want whatever it is. But that's a projection. And that's where the difficulty comes in, is being able to look at something and not do it out of emotion, right? That's the disconnection. I know that podcast will be very valid for you. And that's definitely in the early hundreds, I think. But it's on living disconnected. I'm sorry, detached, not disconnected. You want connection. You don't want attachment. So live in detached. And it will be very helpful because you got to look at it as facts-based versus being driven by emotion. Have emotion because, again, you're a human. Don't be driven by that. And sometimes people don't know how to do that. And that's what we're learning here. And here's key features in gender. Believe it or not, gender is part of this. Yes. Now, I want to be very clear. Why did this topic come up? Was actually not from a gendered female at birth. Is by a gendered male. So I'm getting ready to tell you the statistics, but don't get caught up thinking this is just a female situation. But biologically, this does come in part of that. And especially in marginalized groups as well. And there's this undervalued or acknowledged scenario. And believe it or not, there is this idea that we are given this role. And we are given this role of you are the caretaker. You are the fixer. You are said people. Now you've been given this task. Again, a little bit better these days. Wasn't always this way. Culturally, this is your responsibility. This is your role. This is what you do. So now you are totally, and it's significantly a lot more when it comes to gendered female at birth. But like I said, this topic came up because of a male at birth. So this is it isn't like just exclusive to women. This is exclusive to anybody. But I just want you to know that a lot of times you're given these roles. Now, the other side of that is the man of the house, whatever that looks like, has this emotional labor to make sure that their physical labor, right? They're the caretaker. I mean, they're the money providers. They're doing that. But then there's an emotional labor on their side to kind of not have emotion on what's going, like I work, I come home, this is what I do. So remember, emotional labor isn't always about other people. It's also about self. And we're given this weird sort of, this is your role, this is your role, this is your responsibility. And as the homemaker, as a gendered woman at the time, your job is to manage everybody's emotions. This is your responsibility. So of course, you just take that and you just keep going. So you have to be aware as to where it comes from and why it happens. This is how you prevent blaming yourself and shaming yourself. Understanding where this idea outside of just attachment and insecurity, which we know, can also be almost assigned to you. Well, you are supposed to take this on. This is where you hear family first. You got to take care of family first. What does that mean? Because relatives are different than family. You can have family that's not relatives. And you have to be careful because then you dismiss your feelings. You dismiss the disconnection of unhealthy relationships because, well, you better handle it. Family first. So you're given this. So in your mind, this emotional labor is just part of a normal part of being a person. And it doesn't have to be. We're all going to labor to some extent. But you got to say, am I getting more than I'm not? And that not in a selfish way, because you got to ask yourself that anyway, within yourself. You got to ask that. And, why does emotional labor feel like a burden? Because trust me, it can feel like a burden. And there's the biological and physical reasons that we talked about, psychological reasons. And if you are in constant emotional labor, you are constantly in this fixed mode. You will always stay in a stress response, and it will always lead you to burnout. Always. Not maybe. If you continue the cycle, it will lead you into burnout. And I think, did I do a podcast? I have to double check. I feel like I did a podcast on burnout, but maybe I need to recircle back. Because as I'm sitting here thinking about it, I'm like, I know what the next two topics are, but maybe I need to throw burnout in there. And I think I did it, but maybe I'll circle back because sometimes I think we think what burnout is like we can't move. We feel like all of these things, but it's deeper than that. It doesn't have to be so deep. There's other ways to feel burnout. Feeling stuck is one, but then you got to say, why do I feel stuck? So maybe I will, because it will create this level of emotional burnout, emotional uncertainty. It will create loneliness. It will create isolation. It will create doubt. It will create fear of what happens if you don't do it. What does that mean about you? It will create this self-sabotaging guilt, shame. If I don't take on this burden, I am a selfish person. I am bad. I am wrong. This is the rhetoric that is in your head that you've picked up on, either socially, biologically, at home, society, social media. You're picking up on things and then you're going, well, I have to do this. This is my role. And then what does that do? It creates burnout. It creates resentment. And you definitely are going to feel some kind of way about yourself. Now it kind of takes you into a victim mentality. Like, why can't this be me? Like, why aren't you helping me? And can't they see how I feel? Not that you're wrong. No wrong or right here. It's just you will allow this because you're taking on so much. If you are constantly taking on their burdens, constantly taking on things, and the other side of that, here's the other side of that, for real, you're going to have to set boundaries on them not thinking you need to take it on. Now, that's something you can't control other than I'm not available. And I'm going to give you a little like blurb at the end of this that you can put on there. And there's definitely a few on the worksheet. But people, like I said, are going to get away with what you let them get away with. And if you, because this is where they could even be a little bit of a trauma bond, where they are now reliant upon you to take on this emotional labor. Going back into the trauma bonding, what I said before, let's say mother and daughter relationship. If the daughter is always looking to the mom to take on the emotions, that creates a trauma bond that will create burnout. And do not tell yourself it is my job. It is not your job to take on somebody else's emotions. Period. End of story. So do not do that, because I can hear some of you saying it in the back of your head. No. And the other way around. This is where the trauma bond goes very hand in hand with the emotional labor. And the emotional labor is something that will keep on this feedback loop. And you got to be really, really careful. And, you'll have empathy fatigue. People mistake empathy as availability. Empathy and availability are not the same things. So if you take empathy fatigue, that means where you're overextending your empathy, it's definitely draining your mental resources, and it's leaving little time for yourself. Be kind, be compassionate, but you must protect your peace, right? So if someone is going through something, and I'll give you some of that, kind of drifts into victim mentality too, because God knows I lived that way for a long time. I think because many reasons, but because I was pretty much on my own from a really early age, with everything that was going on, there was this sense of, definitely victim mentality, definitely entitlement of, I went through something bad. I had bad time in my life. You somehow or another, whoever the you are, need to make me feel better. You need to fix it. It was very unfair to me. So I wanted everyone. So yes, it was definitely victim mentality, but it was also a projected need of someone to fix me emotionally. You need to take this on. You need to feel bad because I went through this. You should feel bad. Now, of course, I don't think that now, but I'm saying that because you got to be in that space of acceptance and understanding that this is a for real thing. Because it goes from victim mentality, it can go into something a hell of a lot deeper and darker. So you have to be really careful of that piece of it, because sometimes you can project that need upon somebody else. Now, there's a consequence to all of this, because you can't just keep it like that and just have the consequence of burnout. It goes a hell of a lot deeper. Not only will you have the emotional exhaustion, you're going to be overwhelmed, you're going to be irritable, you're going to be disconnected from everything, which, yes, is burnout, but it's also like, damn, I'm tired. And you will find that every time that something in your personal life comes up for you, you're like, oh my God, I just don't have the energy. You ever said that? Oh, fuck, I don't have any energy anymore. And it's not necessarily because you did anything labor intensive. Maybe it was, and not just work. We know work's going to exhaust you, but you just went to a barbecue. Somebody called you and expected you to fix 15 different problems because now suddenly you're the fixer to do that, right? Do you ever find you're like, oh my God, I'm just overwhelmed with everything. And now you're irritable. You're just snapping at everybody and you're definitely disconnected. You feel completely disconnected from everybody. Here's another big piece of that, and that's loss of your identity. What is the loss of your identity? Forgetting what you even want. You don't even know what the hell you want anymore. Because you're too busy taking on everybody else's emotional baggage. You're taking on everybody else's burdens. And now what the hell do you want anymore? This is where you find that there's different parts of your life where you just kind of keep doing whatever you're doing. Screw you. My needs aren't important anymore. It's too late for me. Go back 2 weeks ago to the start now, like don't wait for the perfect time. Go back there for a minute. And what you're going to find is you're going to hear yourself going, man, am I ready for that? Is it something that I need to do right now? And then you have to reevaluate, is this even for me? Am I doing this because I want to do this? Or am I doing it because I'm told to do this? Because that does play a part. Maybe you want to try some new thing. Maybe you want to do some new thing. Maybe you want to put your priorities on the front burner because these are your goals. Maybe it's hard enough to adapt to your own damn emotional needs, much like everybody else. So now you've shut down. Your whole identity has become these people. Your whole identity has become the parent. Your whole identity has become the teacher. This is your identity now. And again, burnout isn't just about mental. It's also very physical. Because sometimes you don't even know how to function. You're like, oh my God, I'm exhausted. And I'll tell you, this is a big one. And it's what I was saying earlier about not jumping in front of the train to stop it from hitting the brick wall. You are stunting others. If I can say the word, you're stunting other people's growth. You're stunting it because you are enabling others to not have growth. And it's interesting because I remember, and I think I told you guys that before, I think I definitely made that was a big part of my son when he was younger. And I wanted to run interference, right? Like his bio dad, it was before I got with Paul, his bio dad wasn't in his life. And that was my choice to like distance and move. But I just didn't want him to hurt. I didn't want him to feel isolated. I didn't want him to feel as though it was his fault. Great. Problem is, I did not help him. I tried to save him from so much pain and shelter him from not shelter him because I'm not a sheltered girl, but I would make the calls. I would make the appointments. I would do those things. So now when he got older, he even know how to check his own bank account. This is what I did. And it was great. I tried to prevent a lot. Did it really help? Not really. Not really. It made it more labor intensive for me. And then it didn't give him the tools that he needed to go be a whole ass adult. Now, of course, he's almost 29. He's way good with that now. And I don't mean just like, oh, I've never made an appointment at a car dealership before. How do you do that? I mean, that's a little different. I mean, if you've never done something, it's okay to ask for help. Always be able to ask for help. But got to be careful because you will stunt other people's growth. And you always have to say, is me taking all of this on? What would happen if I got run over by a bus tomorrow? And you can't say what won't happen. I think you see the world we live in. Anything can happen. If, all these people, you're like, well, I got to do this and I have to take it on and it's my responsibility and blip, 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 blip. None of that's going to matter if you get hit by a bus tomorrow. They will figure it out. They will figure it out or they won't, but it isn't your responsibility. So that's the part that you have to remind yourself when you get ready to go take all this on. Because again, like I said, why does this happen? You're conditioned at childbirth for many of us. Here's the other part of that. You are praised by being helpful and strong, and you are just awesome. You're so mature. You're praised for these things. So if you're praised for them, go back to trauma bonding, you are getting the oh, I'm so proud of you. And then heaven forbid one thing goes wrong and now you're punished and you're like, oh, the hell happened there? I want to be mature again. I want to make sure I'm managing their emotions and make sure I'm managing mine. Doesn't really matter what I want, but if I'm seen as mature or if I'm seen as helpful or if I'm seen as anything, this is the effort that I have to do. So it isn't just taking on the emotional labor because you're told to. It's also like this backwards way of confirming that. Because you can say, well, every time I do something helpful and nice, I get praise for it. And that matters if you're insecure. Because if you're not insecure, you're like, okay, that's great. I mean, I'm doing it because I want to do it. But you're okay with not getting that. But just so you know, that's a big reason as to why you carry it. And again, if you had a chaotic household, pretty sure most of us on here have, but if you had a chaotic household, managing other people's emotions became a skill, became a job. You're going to manage the emotions. I'm not going to rock the boat. So this way I can control the narrative of them not getting stressed. I am managing everybody's emotions for my own feelings of safety. That's what I'm doing. I'm going to manage those emotions. So again, you take on this emotional labor. Some of that is not your fault, right? Of course. But I'm just telling you why it happens because this way you can understand, right? Obvious one, fear of rejection. This will come in heavily. If you have a fear of rejection or abandonment, we know that that's anxious attachment. Like many other things, anxious attachment, right? You're fearing these things. And when you have that, you're going to worry about other people liking you. You're going to avoid any kind of guilt because now you're going to overcompensate. If you find yourself in that window, let's go through those two. Worrying about other people liking you, avoiding guilt by overcompensating. That's where you're like, oh, girl, guy, y'all, hit me up. It's time for us to work through that personally because that's going to be a big piece of what you're struggling with right there. Right there. Like that in two sentences kind of covers this whole entire podcast. You're worried about people liking you. and overcompensating. That's not the only reason, because then you have validation. If you feel needed, it gives you this false sense of worth. Okay, let me repeat that. If you feel needed, it gives you a false sense of worth. And that only will matter if you are in insecurity and if you are not sure with who you are. Because, I just totally hit myself on the microphone. Because that is what you will find. You find within yourself, okay, if I'm helpful or if I feel valued, this is my worth. Again, kind of take those three that I just brought to you. How do you stop carrying it? Well, obviously it's going to be dig into the deeper root. You got to recognize the pattern. Who are you doing it with? Are you falling in love with hope of the relationship? Do you feel obligated to do it because of the relationship? What is it specifically? You got to shift that mindset. Seriously, put this on in your brain, tattoo it in your brain. Saying no doesn't make me bad, doesn't make me selfish, period. Saying no, period, doesn't make me selfish or bad. It does not. If you have taken on the role of emotional caretaker person and other people have given you that, this is now going to be like, what do you mean no? The hell is that? Like, what? That's wrong. No, it's not wrong. That's how you start walking into your own self, your own peace. And always remember that enabling prevents growth. Enabling prevents growth. If you enable someone, and I mean, feigned helplessness, right? I don't know how to do this and I don't know how to do that. And you just show somebody once, but they don't know. And they're like, well, but I can't do it. So now you're constantly going in to do it and you're enabling. You're enabling the I'm tired. You're enabling the I feel sad today. You're enabling this and people aren't going to grow. Again, your brain doesn't want to take risks. Your brain doesn't like discomfort. Doesn't matter. You're going to have to push through that. So that's how you're going to stop. Boundaries, of course. My favorite thing ever, boundaries. And a simple sentence, and tattoo this on your brain, write this down, pause this, go get a paper and pen, write this down, whatever you need to do. I care about you, but I can't take this on. Period. Okay, hey, I care about you, I love you, I can't take this on. And guess what? That person's going to be like, oh, well, what do you mean? Well, I'm always there for you. Well, what do you mean you can't take this on? I need you right now. I'm not asking you not to be there for people, but you can't take on everybody else's stuff. If you can't be on the ready for everybody's emotions, you can't do it. But the question is, are you willing to make that statement? Are you willing to disappoint somebody? Are you willing to be misunderstood? Are you willing to not give a detailed reason? If you're willing, now we're moving forward. If you're not willing yet, then we want to work on why you're not willing, right? So there's two things. You're like, oh my God, that seems terrifying. That's fine. Let's just work individually on why that seems terrifying. Or, hell yeah, I'm ready to go for it. Then let's go for it. There's no right or wrong. It's just, where are you in part of that journey? You're not behind, you're not ahead. It's just different. And you got to have actionable steps for delegating. You don't have to do it all. Stop taking it on, right? You don't get to take it all on and then get upset with people. You have to delegate, and some people aren't going to want to be delegated to. But you have to encourage others. You know, hey, I know that you can figure this out. I have faith in you that you can figure this out, period. Not I have faith in you because this is why and you're resilient. No. I have faith that you can figure this out. You're not enabling, empower. You got to empower, but you got to give them the opportunity to see that they can do it. So always coming to the ready and always coming to the rescue and taking on this emotional labor is not giving them that growth. It's not giving them the resilience. Again, here comes a choo-choo train. There's the brick wall. Oh my goodness, they're going to hit that brick wall. Great. They need to hit the brick wall, because now they can adjust. And guess what? Maybe they're going to hit that brick wall 4 times. Maybe they're going to hit that brick wall 444 times. Not your job to prevent. And each time they will become more and more resilient. They'll go through a victim mindset. They'll think you should do it. Now they're angry with you. Hey, it's sink or swim. So they're just going to have to learn to swim. And sometimes the best way to learn to swim, same way I learned to swim, throw you right in the water. You got two choices. You're going to sink or swim. And you learn to swim very quickly when you're not thinking about, do I fear it or anything like that. Another thing to remind yourself and put it on your little vision board for the morning or how you start your day is it's not selfish to prioritize myself. It is not selfish to prioritize myself. And quite honestly, before you can even go through, like I said, the trauma bonds and taking steps to live your best life and do these things, it kind of starts in the beginning. Am I willing? I didn't say, do you have the tools? I didn't say, are you doing it? Are you acting in it? Am I willing to be uncomfortable? Am I willing to maybe be alone? Am I willing to piss people off? Am I willing to have people disappointed in me? It's not about the how. It's not about will you. It's are you willing? Not, oh, well, I think I do. Are you willing? Because that has to be the foundation in everything we're doing. You cannot build a house on sand. That shit is not going to last. So I think you got to get honest with yourself. Are you willing to distance from relationships that you want that aren't good for you? And yes, this includes family. Actually, it's especially family. You're allowed to be disappointed. You're allowed to feel some kind of way, but are you willing? And that's what you have to ask yourself right there, because that's the first step. But I want you to say to yourself, wow, am I in emotional burnout? Like, is this emotional labor really bad for me? What identity, because this is another question, what identity am I attaching by taking on others' emotions? What am I filling or trying to fill, by trying to take on everybody else's stuff? And then that's your answer. And then that's where we go. But I promise you, you do not have to take this on. And I promise you, it is not your sole purpose in life to manage everybody's life. But what you do want to do is be your biggest priority. Handle your own emotions, because that's what you're going to learn. And then you learn what you will tolerate, what you won't, and how you can be there for people without feeling resentment. Because once you start taking all this shit on, you're going to feel resentful. Not maybe, you will. So if you do this by having empathy, by having boundaries, by allowing yourself to be in a certain space, now we're talking. Now we are making moves. And that's how you do it. But the biggest question you got to ask yourself is all of this, my podcast, anybody's podcast, my worksheets, workbooks, speaking engagements, am I willing to take action? Not how am I going to do it, but am I willing? Because it might be an isolated journey for a hot minute. You might have to disconnect from people, but are you willing? And that's all you need, is a little bit of hope for yourself, but not hope for change in others.